Tonight, Senator Lydia Thorp backtracks on her claim she never pledged allegiance to the monarch. Hello, I'm Lydia Feng. This is ABC News. The new support package for residents struck by Broken Hill's blackouts. Turkey retaliates after militants attack a defence company in the country's capital. The Prime Minister joins the King and other Commonwealth leaders in Samoa. And a new adventure awaits Koala's train station, Koala. Renegade Senator Lydia Thorp has walked back her account of her parliamentary swearing-in day, saying her mispronunciation of the Oath of Allegiance was in fact a mistake. She told the ABC yesterday she swore allegiance to the Queen's heirs, not her heirs, sparking calls from the coalition to have her suspended. But Senator Thorp says she's not going anywhere. Political reporter Isabel Rowe reports.
3 days on from this outburst before the King, Lydia Thorp remains in the spotlight.
The whole world is talking about it and my people are happy.
Critics say Monday's protest broke her oath of allegiance to the monarch, an oath the Victorian Independent pointed out yesterday she actually fudged.
Her heirs and successors according to law.
It wasn't her heirs, it was her heirs that I was giving my allegiance to, and now that, they're no longer here, I don't know where that stands.
The opposition is seeking legal advice on whether that mispronunciation could be grounds for dismissal.
What we see now is a circumstance that creates a doubt over her eligibility and validity to have taken up her seat in the Senate.
By mid-morning, Senator Thorp's explanation had changed.
My English grammar isn't as good as others, and I spoke what I read, so I misspoke. Well, it starts with a H, so...
Lydia Thorp has found a smattering of support from the Senate.
It's her right as an Indigenous woman and as an Australian citizen and as a senator to raise these issues. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Okay.
In fact, I found her words deeply moving.
She says she's speaking for those outside the halls of power.
All Aboriginal people that I've bumped into around the street have all pulled me up to say, "Oh, Michael, did you see that woman on their TV? She's standing up for us."
Constitutional experts believe because the senator signed the oath, she did swear in correctly. Still, the Senate could vote on a censure motion, a symbolic condemnation with no legal consequences.
And we'll work with people across the chamber about what the appropriate response is.
I'm an independent. No one can kick me out of there.
Defiance until the end. Isabel Rowe, ABC News, Canberra.
Pacific countries are ramping up pressure on Australia over climate change as Anthony Albanese lands in Samoa to join a large meeting of Commonwealth leaders. King Charles has also used his first day in the country to highlight the existential threat fossil fuels pose, not just to the Pacific, but to the world. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts is in Samoa for the meeting.
The Pacific's beauty is fragile and its future uncertain.
We will not sit quietly and allow others to determine our fate.
As sea levels rise, Pacific leaders today launching a new report which finds 3 wealthy countries, Australia, Canada and the UK, have been responsible for more than 60% of emissions generated by new coal and gas projects in the Commonwealth since 1990. Tuvalu's Prime Minister Feleti Teo has signed a landmark pact with Canberra, but says if the federal government doesn't phase out fossil fuel exports, the future looks grim.
To put it plainly, it is a death sentence, not phrases that I use lightly.
All of us have to respond on climate, all major economies in particular.
King Charles also keen to highlight dire climate threats, visiting mangroves which guard against coastal erosion, and being granted the honour of a chiefly title. Anthony Albanese landed this afternoon in Samoa in driving rain. Another reminder of how quickly the weather can shift here and how vulnerable the region is to even small climate shifts. He could face some hard questions on fossil fuels and on climate finance. But the Prime Minister will also want to remind Australians of the progress the government's made, building deeper security and strategic links with the region. Like a new Pacific Police support group encouraged by Australia with an eye on China. Officers from across the region now hitting Samoa's streets for its first ever deployment, providing security for CHOGM. But security threats take many shapes. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Apia.
5 people have been killed and at least 22 injured in a terror attack in Turkey. A male and a female terrorist armed with rifles and explosives opened fire at an aerospace company. Turkey was fast to retaliate, launching more than 30 airstrikes against Kurdish militant targets.
2 gun-wielding assailants stalked towards their target, the headquarters of one of Turkey's most important defence and aviation companies. First gunfire, then an explosion. Surveillance cameras capture a gunman up close when he enters the facility near Ankara. Special forces deploy, then communications are silenced.
I called my brother who was inside and said, "What happened?" He said, "A bomb had exploded." Then the phones shut off.
4 of the dead were employees of the aerospace company. One, mechanical engineer Zahida Güçlü, arrived at the entrance at the same time as the attackers. She was collecting a bunch of flowers sent by her husband. The 5th was the taxi driver who drove the pair to the location. Turkey's defence minister suggested the Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as the PKK, a listed terrorist group in Australia, was behind the attack.
This complex houses Turkish Aerospace Industries, a major manufacturer of both civilian and military aircraft, and in particular drones. Those drones have been used extensively in Turkey's fight against Kurdish militants. The attack came just one day after a far-right ally of Turkish President Erdogan called for the imprisoned leader of the PKK to be released if he renounced violence and disbanded the organisation.
The Turkish president was in Russia, attending a summit with Vladimir Putin.
I would like to express my condolences.
I condemn this heinous attack.
Our prayers are with all of those affected and their families, and of course also the people of Turkey at this very difficult time.
In response, Turkey launched more than 30 airstrikes against Kurdish militants in Iraq and Syria. Eric Twarchek, ABC News, Istanbul.
Israel has continued to attack southern Beirut, destroying residential buildings in a wave of violent strikes. It comes as Israeli authorities have arrested more than a dozen people on charges of carrying out missions for Iran.
Beirut's night sky lit up as Israeli strikes pound the capital. One hitting the empty office of pro-Iranian broadcaster Al Mayadeen. Hours earlier, the Israeli military issued evacuation warnings for the ancient port city of Tyre. Popular with tourists, the vibrant metropolis had largely been spared until now. Israel hitting buildings close to heritage sites, including the UNESCO-listed Roman Hippodrome.
It was the first time we heard these sounds. It was terrible, really terrible.
The Israeli military said it was targeting Hezbollah assets in the area, but Tyre is home to many civilians with no ties to the Iranian-backed terrorist group.
We took the children, grabbed what we could and fled. Suddenly, while we were sitting by the sea, we heard that our house had been destroyed.
Hezbollah firing more rockets at Israel, some as far south as Tel Aviv. All happening as the US Secretary of State was in Israel trying to negotiate ceasefires with Hezbollah and Hamas in Gaza.
We're working to get clear understandings for Gaza's governance, for its security, for its reconstruction, and what the international community can do to help.
In Khan Yunis, Gazans are desperately searching for something to eat.
Sometimes we manage to get a pack of bread, but other times we leave empty-handed. Sometimes we and the children manage to eat, and sometimes we don't.
And as the fighting continues on two fronts, Israel continues to plan its retaliatory attack against Iran after a barrage of missiles earlier this month. And Israeli authorities have arrested more than a dozen people in the last fortnight accused of spying for Iran. Growing unease as US efforts to stem the violence falter. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
A warning, the following two stories contain Nazi symbols. 3 men have been fined after being found guilty of performing a Nazi salute outside the Jewish Museum in Sydney in October last year. Ryan Marshall, Daniel Muston and Anthony Raymond Mitchell were all convicted of knowingly displaying by public act a Nazi symbol without excuse. The trio was captured performing Nazi salutes outside the museum less than a week after the deadly Hamas attack on Israel last year. It's the first successful prosecution since the state made it illegal to display a Nazi symbol. The offence carries a maximum penalty of 1 year imprisonment and a $10,000 fine. Each man avoided jail and were all fined less than $1,200. Outside court, Muston was involved in a scuffle with a camera operator. High-profile restaurateur Alan Yazbek has pleaded guilty to displaying a Nazi symbol at a pro-Palestinian rally in Sydney. The 56-year-old was seen holding a placard in Hyde Park earlier this month, which featured the Israeli flag, but replaced the Star of David with a blue swastika. Mr Yazbek is a co-founder of the Nomad Group, which runs high-end venues in Sydney and Melbourne. He's previously apologised for carrying the sign and is due to be sentenced in December. The Premier has used a visit to Broken Hill to announce rebates for homes and businesses affected by the past week's power outages. He's also increased the pressure on operator Transgrid, suggesting the company may be in breach of its contract for not providing sufficient backup power.
Trying to get on with it, cafes like Julie Murphy's were crushed by the blackout.
We have lost all our stock. Our freezers defrosted, our fridges, everything basically had to go.
On top of losing thousands of dollars of stock, the uncertainty about future outages is making matters worse.
Every time I go to a supplier to get stuff, you're just totally anxious because you don't know what's going to happen.
While visiting Broken Hill, the Premier fielded questions from the crowd, but he also had his own for energy provider Transgrid and why their backup generators weren't ready for this scenario.
That's a condition of the contract, and there needs to be answers as to how this happened.
Chris Minns also announced modest $200 rebates for households and $400 for small and medium businesses. The opposition insists that's not enough.
How will the $400 for businesses that have lost $35,000 help them?
$200 per household or $400 for a business? How's that helping anyone?
I realise that's not going to make everybody whole, and there's been significant disruption and interruption in power, but it's the first step.
For businesses here, the promise of ongoing support is a welcome one.
$400 isn't enough. We know it's not enough, but it's just something to help us right now until more can come through.
I think as a whole, we can look at it as hope that there is more to come.
Transgrid again declined to be interviewed, but said in a statement they're installing additional generators and working to get the power restored as quickly as possible. For frustrated locals living in Broken Hill and surrounding towns, it can't come quick enough. Bill Ormond, ABC News, Broken Hill.
Australia's Big Four banks are using artificial intelligence to help decide home loan approvals. Staff in call centres are also being assisted by AI, sparking fears that jobs could be cut.
At ANZ's new AI centre,
Workers are being taught how artificial intelligence can help them process loan applications.
So whenever you apply for a loan, we have to pick up all sorts of information such as pay slips, proof of employment, complex loan contracts. AI can now allow us to actually take information from documents, cutting the amount of time it takes from hours and hours down to sometimes mere seconds.
AI also acts as an over-the-shoulder assistant for about 1,200 call centre staff.
People have used this technology to very quickly summarise everything about what the bank has on file for the customer.
Unions are worried about job losses and they want banks to explain to staff how it will change their work.
We don't want to see a situation where finance workers or consumers in Australia are simply having AI foisted upon them and they are having to deal with whatever the banks decide is a good idea.
Now, the danger, particularly for financial institutions or any institution that is governed by certain codes of behaviour, is that those AIs will make mistakes.
The rapid pace at which AI is advancing means the technology is moving faster than the regulation. The European Union has already introduced some laws to regulate artificial intelligence, a model Australia could consider. ANZ says the risks are being carefully weighed up.
I don't think that's likely to happen in the next 5 to 10 years of having a home loan completely decided by a machine. I think it's very likely, though, that the way we're going to buy homes will be fundamentally different.
Differences customers will soon see as they interact with Australia's biggest lenders. Nassim Khadem, ABC News.
Coming up on 7:30, less than 2 weeks out from the US election, are black voters abandoning the Democratic Party?
I will be voting for Donald Trump.
Why?
Why? I believe that he would be a much better candidate.
Donald Trump has a certain kind of appeal to male voters in general, including male African-American voters.
Dude attacked his own country. He's finna be the president again. Come on, man.
The state government has announced plans for a new licensing system to combat the growing black market tobacco trade in New South Wales. Under the proposed legislation, only law-abiding retailers can hold licences, with fines doubling for those caught selling illegal products or to minors. In just a 3-month period, health officers seized millions of illegal cigarettes with a street value of over $4 million. The government says New South Wales needed to act to avoid criminal tobacco conflicts similar to those in Victoria. A bungled assassination attempt in Sydney's West yesterday has police searching for 2 gunmen, one of whom could have serious burns to his legs. Investigators say all the evidence points to a targeted shooting with strong links to organised crime.
The third attempt on one man's life culminates in this: a would-be assassin accidentally setting himself on fire as he torches a car in Carramar.
We believe he would have sustained a significant burn.
That man and his accomplice run off into the park towards Prospect Creek, leaving behind a trail of evidence, including their getaway car.
We believe we have seized a second getaway car, which the 2 offenders failed to get into, and they've taken off through the park.
Earlier, police say the 2 men had fired several shots at 3 people in a vehicle 1 suburb away in Auburn.
Fortunately, no one was injured in that shooting incident, but a number of shots were fired in a public place, which is very concerning for police.
Police believe only one of them was their intended target.
We need to be really clear with this one. This is a targeted shooting, and it has strong links to organised crime.
It's understood that the target had survived 2 previous assassination attempts in the last 18 months. Police had recently spoken to the man and warned him that his life may be in imminent danger.
They're confident they'll track them down, thanks to what was left behind in Prospect Creek.
And my message to those 2 people is we're going to get you. We're going to come after you because we've got strong evidence which is going to link you to the scene. So best option is come forward now, we can sort it out.
A painful mistake which could ultimately be their downfall. Nabil Al-Nashar, ABC News, Sydney.
Donald Trump's longest-serving chief of staff says he believes the Republican presidential nominee meets the definition of a fascist. Retired Marine General John Kelly worked in Donald Trump's White House between 2017 and 2019. He's told the New York Times that while in office, the former president had praised Hitler for doing some good things and prefers the dictator approach to government. The Trump campaign called the claims fabricated, but Vice President and Democratic candidate Kamala Harris has seized on the reporting.
Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions.
To finance now, here's Alan Koala.
Earlier this week, it emerged that WiseTech founder and CEO, billionaire Richard White, had bought expensive houses for women he was having affairs with and paying them big salaries. Today, a leaked letter by a former director accused him of intimidation and bullying. It was the last straw. The share price fell another 6.5%, taking the total loss of value to more than $8 billion in a week. And tonight, Richard White resigned, effective immediately. The market as a whole eased today with falls by miners, gains by banks. And in banking news, there is a rare split between them. It's about that loan buffer the bank regulator increased from 2.5% to 3% during the pandemic. It means, of course, that you can only get the loan if you can afford repayments at a 3% higher rate than you're actually paying. So we thought the banks all wanted it cut back to 2.5% as it was, so they can lend some more. But no, NAB and ANZ do. So does the Australian Banks Association, but today it emerged that Westpac and Commonwealth Bank want it kept at 3% because they're worried about delinquency. Also, they're doing fine, thanks. Speaking of banks, CBA released some analysis of its customer data today showing the impact of the tax cuts, which was quite big in the last quarter. But guess what? Spending did not rise at all. And the second guess what is that the 20% with the lowest incomes are the only ones reducing their spending. In other words, the poorest families are doing all the work of slowing the economy and reducing inflation. The US market fell last night, so did Hong Kong today, while Tokyo rose. Commodities mostly fell, gold, iron ore and oil all down by more than 1%, and the Aussie dollar continued to drift against the strong US dollar. And that's finance.
A raft of sporting heroes have been unveiled as the latest inductees into the Australian Sport Hall of Fame. Accomplishments have been recognised from the athletics track to the bowling green.
Olympic hurdles champion Sally Pearson is still coming to terms with her achievements.
It's quite surreal. All of a sudden you have this phone call saying, oh, we're going to induct you into the Sporting Hall of Fame. Like, really? What? Now?
One of 8 new inductees into Sport Australia's Hall of Fame, the 2012 London gold medalist counts herself lucky.
It's just who is the best athlete on the day, and if you can manage to be able to be that person, then there's no better feeling.
3-time surfing world champion Mick Fanning's beach days now look a little different in retirement.
The days that I get to take my kids out is so much more humbling, but also so much more rewarding than what I ever did when I hear them screaming and having so much fun. Best thing in the world.
Karen Murphy is the first female bowls player to receive the honour after news earlier this week the sport made the cut for the Commonwealth Games.
It's been a great week. Bowls in the Commonwealth Games means everything to our athletes and everyone who's gone before us.
Not so lucky was hockey. Former Kookaburras captain, now Hall of Famer Mark Knowles, not giving up hope of the sport's return to the Games.
The optimist in me would say, let's hope this is a reduced Games and we see back to normality in the future. But no one knows what the future at the moment looks like for the Com Games.
This latest round of inductees join the likes of Dawn Fraser, Richie Benaud and Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley as icons of this sport. Their inclusion in the Hall of Fame now cementing the legacy they've already left. 2 Hall of Fame members will be elevated to legend status on November 18. Erin Marsicovetere, ABC News.
The AFLW's Indigenous Round kicks off tonight in Cairns with a match-up between Hawthorn and Naarm. The second-placed Hawks are aiming for their first grand final, but midfielder Mattia Breed has already made history. She's just the 3rd Tiwi Islander woman to play in the league, despite its enormous popularity in the region.
When Mattia Breed steps into the Hawkes Museum at Waverley Park, she's able to take in the achievements of Hawthorn's past Indigenous heroes. But connection to her own heritage has proved elusive.
My nana was part of the stolen generation and then raised in a Catholic mission, wasn't taught any of her culture or traditions or anything like that.
Breed grew up in Darwin, the daughter of 2 police officers. But after her grandmother died, Mum Rosanna took a job on the Tiwi Islands to reconnect with culture.
Indigenous cultures are passed down so heavily through oral history and traditions. That's why Mum made it such a mission to learn as much as she could and pass that down, even though it wasn't organic.
It's one reason Breed calls her mum, who played the game into her 50s, her hero.
To have someone that's so heavily in your corner to support you in every element is just, I might get a little bit teary.
Aussie Rules dominates the Tiwi Islands, with 900 men and women playing the game out of a population of just 2,500, with the Women's League fielding an impressive 7 teams alone. But the barriers to making it to the top, explored in the recent documentary Like My Brother, remain even today.
When you see that sort of talent, you just think if someone was there to nurture and support you and help you get to the next level, the possibilities are endless.
In the meantime, Breed's extensive Tiwi family will be cheering her on against the demons. Kate O'Halloran, ABC News.
A koala that went viral online when it was found on a train station in Sydney's southwest has been released into the wild. Claus, the koala, was discovered exploring the platforms at Koala 2 weeks ago and was rescued by wires a day later. Volunteers today released Claus into bushland in southwest Sydney. They say his discovery in suburbia is a sign the local koala population is under stress, but they're happy to see him back where he belongs.
It's absolutely wonderful. Another one saved. Sitting up there, gone very high up now, munching on his eucalypt leaves, and he will sit up there, maybe come down tonight, go for a walk. He might meet up with other koalas.
Let's take a look at the weather now. And Tom, a stormy night for parts of the state.
Lydia, midnight rain and thunder is ahead for parts of the east, and it was looking dark and stormy in Newcastle this afternoon. But the majority of the storms developed to the north, and they're currently focused just around the mid-north coast. Tarree's already picked up more than 15 millimetres, including some hail that fell at around 4 p.m. Now, here is the Sydney radar. Showers are trying to form, but not much has fallen in the gauges so far. The heaviest falls right now remain just to the west of the city. Last night was mild. 18 in the city was 4 degrees above average. A southerly change then arrived at around 7 a.m. It gusted to 50 kilometres per hour near the coast. Now, the southerlies held the airport to 22 degrees. That was 9 cooler than yesterday. A high of 23 for the city was 3 below yesterday and average for October. Last night was mild over the north under cloud, a low of 20 in Bourke. That was 6 above average. It was cooler in the south, down to 5 degrees at Deniliquin. Today's maximums were cooler apart from on the north coast where the southerly did not arrive until this afternoon. 34 at Evans Head was 8 degrees above average. On the satellite then, well, normally storms arrive ahead of a change, but on this occasion the cloud is building behind the southerly, and that's due to a trailing tongue of cold air a few kilometres above the surface. We call that an upper trough. Now, we analyse upper troughs by looking at the temperature at about 5 kilometres aloft. This protruding cold air from the south marks the axis of that trough as it passes east over the New South Wales coast overnight. Back to the surface now, and the pressure systems are all moving towards the east, and that's why most of the rain will clear off the coast by tomorrow morning. Around the country then, an early shower or storm for Brisbane and 30 degrees. Cold with a possible shower for Melbourne and Hobart. For the northeast tomorrow, well, storms overnight, but easing and contracting to the coast by the morning. Only the odd shower lingering into the afternoon. We're heading for maximums in the low to mid-20s for most areas. For the southeast, showers mostly clearing from the coast by the morning, although a possible afternoon shower for the Illawarra. Dry inland with tops in the mid to high teens. To the west, a cool night, then a sunny day. Southerly winds will keep temperatures a touch below average, 20 in Albury and Wagga Wagga, 27 degrees in Bourke and Moree. On the waters, strong 30-knot winds for most of the coast. and seas will average up to 3 metres for the south and the far north. Now for Sydney, well, it will be wet tonight, even a storm possible, then mostly clearing by tomorrow morning, staying partly cloudy with just a slight chance of a shower continuing into the afternoon. Southerly winds to 35 kilometres per hour, 13 to 21 for the city, a high of 19 in Bondi and Wollongong, 22 in Parramatta and 24 in Penrith. The sun will rise at 6:01 and ahead, mostly sunny Saturday, 20 to 22. Then warmer Sunday as the winds swing to a northeasterly, partly cloudy, 25 to 27. And then a warm day Monday with a possible late shower. Lydia?
Tom, thank you. Here's Sarah Ferguson now with 7:30.